Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good night, no matter where you are. Welcome to the Irv Homer Show. We're here on, we're on cyberspace as long as the Chinese permit us to be on cyberspace. Welcome to the Irv Homer Show, broadcasting from IrvHomer.com. Website is www.irvhomer.com. Email me at evilirv@irvhomer.com. We do this program Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we kick around with our audience. Never know what the size of it is, but we do appreciate when you join us tonight. As you can tell, folks, this is a very informal program. And my dog just sits next. Now, Shana, you sit down, be a good girl. You hear that?
That's why we need a new microphone.
You'll be on television eventually, young lady, when we decide to put you in the dog show. However, welcome back to the Irv Homer Show, ladies and gentlemen. And if you want to participate, you're more than welcome to use our chat room or our telephone at 215-253-8877, 215-253-8877. And today on my commercial radio station, where I broadcast on WBCB 1490 AM in Levittown, Bucks, Mercer, and Berlin County, I don't give out the phone numbers anymore. I told my listeners, if you want to call, look it up in the phone book. I've decided that I will do the commentary. If you want to participate, please feel free to use the chat room or the phone number. But I don't do this program waiting for calls or for some input. If you have something to say, if you have some question to ask, the facilities are available. But I'm a talk show freak, as you know, and I listen to talk radio around the country, which is absolutely an abomination. Why do I say that? People say, well, Irving, you're jealous of Limbaugh. You're jealous. You're damn right I am. I'm jealous as hell. And you know why? Because the misinformation and the idiocy of the type of program that they are required to do absolutely boggles my mind. And it is because of the blatant ignorance of the masses of this country who are looking to be saved by a savior, either your religionist or your God or Allah or Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity. You've got to be saved. And so when these people lead you by the hand, by the nose, and take your mind and twist it, you feel free and feel comfortable. See, you think, God forbid the American people should think for themselves and demand that a voice like mine be heard, which deals with common sense and not idiocy. I don't know where to start. I am so frustrated tonight, but I will start with Mr. Limbaugh today on his program. And yeah, you tune him in if you want to hear. A lot of you people will actually enjoy this guy and swear by everything, but you don't have the faintest idea of how he is manipulating the masses, as Hitler did, as Stalin did, as Mao did, as Napoleon did, as Ho Chi Minh did. You love to be led by people who are manipulating your brain so that you don't have to use it yourself. See, it is always easier to use somebody else's brain than to use your own. And so I will go after Mr. Limbaugh today, in case you heard him, taking on the black political caucus of today, who had the audacity, the nerve, to go to Cuba and meet personally with Fidel Castro. Oh, and he went on and on. How dare them? And oh my God, and his listeners were outraged. What's wrong with that black political caucus going to our fierce enemy, Fidel Castro? And I'm driving to work today, and I said, I cannot take this. I cannot take it under the slightest premise. First of all, apparently Mr. Limbaugh doesn't know anything about Fidel Castro or Cuba. If he does, or if his people do, they're very quiet so that they can manipulate the idiots that listen to his program and call in. And so I did on my program today, who is Fidel Castro and where did he come from? This man, since 1963, has a bone of contention for the United States, 90 miles off the coast of Florida. The man has no Navy, no Air Force, no Army. But the excitement that Fidel Castro has generated on 600 radio stations across the country today was absolutely mind-boggling. My listeners said bits and pieces of who Fidel Castro was, where he came from, why do we fear him, blah, 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 blah. Everyone reminded me of the 5 blind men of Hindustan who were asked to describe an elephant. One blind man said, well, I feel his tail and it feels like an elephant must be a rope. Another one with the ears, it's a fan. Another one with his leg, the elephant must be a tree. All 5 blind men were right in the part that they saw. But none of them have seen the real elephant. And apparently Limbaugh, the blind OxyContin drug addict that he is, either didn't know what the whole elephant of Cuba and Fidel Castro was like, or he did know, but it wouldn't make sense for him to inform his public that America made Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro also is a doctorate. He has 2 doctorates, one in linguistics. The man speaks 6 or 7 foreign languages fluently, English being one of them. And while Mr. Limbaugh was criticizing the black political caucus for going to meet with Fidel Castro, on the very radio station he broadcasts in Philadelphia, WPHT, the 50,000-watt big talker, their morning man, my dear friend Michael Smerconish and Senator Arlen Specter were in Cuba about 2 years ago and had dinner with Fidel Castro, and not once did Rush Limbaugh ever criticize Senator Specter or his colleague on WPHT for being in Cuba having dinner with Fidel Castro. Now, it's understandable why. Because the idiots that listen to Limbaugh don't know that his colleague went to Cuba and had dinner and broke bread with that fierce dictator, or would dare not attack Mr. Specter.
Hello.
Hello, you're on the air. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Irv. This is Ed. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Ed. How about yourself?
Oh, great. It's great to talk to you, Irv. I have 2 topics, Irv, I wanted to cover with you.
Sure.
I was wondering if you saw the recent article or news about Philip Berg, who was on your show a while back, regarding his being taken off the ballot for falsifying, or not falsifying, but inappropriately certifying his own ballots.
No, I haven't seen the latest update, and he hasn't contacted me. So, if you can add some information, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, well, apparently what happened in the article, the paper said that he was in the Republic and he notarized his own signatures, which is against the, and I just found it interesting that there was his case against Obama involved, documents that were questionable, and there's a guy who, went ahead and being an attorney, did something that was really inappropriate in an election. But I didn't know if you'd seen it, so I didn't want to surprise you with that. But
no, I didn't. But if Mr. Berg did anything about the illegal or unethical, I think that he should be looked at with the amount of scorn, ridicule, and possible prosecution if he did anything wrong.
Absolutely. Well, I think we agreed on that, Irv. The other thing was, Irv, what do you think the point of us going into Afghanistan really is? I can't imagine that we're going to have any success in there, escalating the troop counts, going in there trying to find bin Laden, who isn't even there. I mean, is this insanity or, what do you think?
Well, there are 2 reasons or 3 reasons that we're in Afghanistan. And number 1 is that the alleged war on drugs,
right,
in which the biggest production of opium comes from the Northern Alliance of the warlords up there. We have tried under the Clinton administration, under the Bush administration, to stop the flow of drugs and opium coming out of there because that is their bumper crop. The whole economy of Afghanistan is based on the opium sales. And so in our war against drugs, like I said, under the Clinton administration, under the Bush administration, and under the present administration, is to fight these warlords. And we've offered them $500 an acre a year if they would destroy the opium plants and plant other type of fruits and vegetables for the community. It doesn't work because the warlords, in addition to being warlords of their own domain, hate each other, and they fight each other over the opium trade. That is one of... Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, what I would say to that is we've tried that in Colombia and Mexico and these other countries where they're producing each other. When are we going to learn?
Well, you bring up an excellent point. And we don't learn from past experience because either we don't study history or each administration figures they're going to do better than the other administration. It is one of the reasons that Osama bin Laden has decided to hide in the Northern Alliance between the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan, where he is loved, where he is honored, respected, and puts millions of dollars in that community there, as the Black Panthers used to do in Philadelphia when they used to surprise Sunday breakfast and breakfast for the kids and everything else. So the fact that
he's a folk hero.
He is, well, he's more than a folk hero. He's their benefactor for the warlords who provides them with protection from corrupting the Pakistan police, the whatever government Afghanistan tries to impose. We have never learned that the biggest enemy of drugs is not the warlords or the Mexican drug dealers, but we as Americans who love to use drugs.
Yeah.
And so we take that responsibility and blame somebody else. Well, if they didn't supply it, we wouldn't use it. Well, if we didn't use it, they wouldn't supply it. So instead of having a real drug war in which the facts of life should be taught to young people and to people in America about the real problem with drugs, we blame it on the other side because no politician wants to blame his constituents for something that they're responsible for. As I've said many times, when I addressed the prisoners in Graterford Prison, I told the prisoners there, you love cops. And they said, oh, no, we don't. I said, yes, you do. Well, how do you say we love cops? We don't like... Well, why would you give them a job and commit crime? If a criminal don't like the cops, then don't give them a job. And yet, so finally, after about a half an hour, it sunk in to some of the prisoners who were sometimes far more smarter than the legislature in Harrisburg, finally sunk into them, this guy makes sense. If you don't like somebody, why give them a job? Well, if you don't like drug dealers in Mexico, you don't like drug dealers in Afghanistan, don't use the drugs and let them die a natural death. The other thing is that we are doing the same thing in Afghanistan that we did in Vietnam. When the French were defeated at Dien Bien Phu, the French warned, do not go in there. The Vietnamese people fought France and won. They fought China, which is a country that is far more dominant in population than Vietnam, and have defeated China when China tried to occupy French Indochina, which was Vietnam. And Vietnam came out victoriously. But stupid us, we were going to stop the domino theory, and so when the French pulled out, we went into Vietnam and had our ass kicked. So we're doing the same thing in Afghanistan. Russia lost 16,000 troops in Afghanistan and finally had to pull out. We're going to lose the same thing if we try to. We're going to be there for the rest of our life. Afghanistan, I'll tell you how stupid the American State Department was. And we supported the Taliban. See, people don't know that we supported Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan. We made them. When they were fighting the Russians, we supplied the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda and the Mujahideen with all the weapons they needed to fight and defeat the Russians.
Now, Irv, why were the Russians there? I forget why they originally went in there.
They wanted to go in there to get a warm water port for their oil exploration that they had finally developed. See, Russia only has one warm water port, and that's Murmansk. Okay. And Russia is basically landlocked when it comes to delivering oil. So they wanted access to the Black Sea, and it went right through Afghanistan. And they wanted that area, and that's why they went in there. However, they were they were under the impression they were going to beat these crazy little warlords, and we got the greatest weapons and all. Well, Russia, as I said, lost over 16,000 people, and we supplied the Al-Qaeda and the Mujahideen and the Taliban with the weapons. Now, people are under the impression that, well, their enemy. Why did we help them? We helped them because when we promised them total independence and non-interference into their oppressive ways, because they are basically fundamentalist Muslims. And under the Taliban Afghanistan, it was a real religious country. They threw us out of there and said, look, it is our country, thank you very much, but goodbye, and you're not going to have an influence here, and we're going to allow the opium dealers to plant their opium and sell it on the open market, and if you want to buy it, fine. So we've never learned from Vietnam, we never learned from Korea, we never learned from any of the countries that we never learned from Cuba.
I mean, suppose we win the war there. What do we do with that country? We occupy a mountainous, inaccessible, really awful place to live, loaded with drug, manufacturing, and where it's loaded with terrorists who can constantly be, at your heels forever.
There are multiple kingdoms in there run by the warlords.
Wow.
And there is a highly orthodoxy of laws of Sharia, the laws of Hammurabi. If you go into your computers and study what the law of Hammurabi was, these are cultures that are 5, 6, 7, 8, 10,000 years old, that it will not change because of Western domination. There isn't even a railroad in the whole country of Afghanistan. You can't get access to part of Afghanistan unless you go by donkey. You can't even build a road there. Wow. And yet, because of our arrogance and stupidity of the State Department and the military-industrial complex and other things, instead of evaluating, say, look, we can't take these people out fighting the way the Russians did. And we're doing exactly the same thing. So now we're going to put another 20,000 in there, and we'll put another 15,000 in there. It isn't going to work. The second thing and third thing, as we said, Ed, they love Osama bin Laden. And they're not going to, there's a $50 million hit on Osama bin Laden. They will not turn him in. He is their savior. He is their benefactor. And we are losing a fighting. You'll never have a democracy as we want to have in Afghanistan, and we won't have one in Iraq either, unless we have a full military presence. We've just had more bombings in the last couple of weeks. Instead of killing Americans, thank God for that, they're now killing the Afghans who are cooperating with Malachi and the Iraqi government. So these people have their own ideology, their own religious prejudice and biases. They don't want anybody there. Now, the problem is the influence of the so-called terrorists against Western culture and against the United States. And so we're in there to prevent Iran from going in there, to prevent the other enemies of America from going in there. But when it comes to trying to, we have an ignorance in this, and I don't want to be un-American, and because I get labeled with that all the time. Yeah. We do not have an education system in this country that teaches foreign languages. Yeah. We do not have the ability to have diplomats who know the culture, who know the language. And so what we did, we hired guys like that clown that we had in Iraq to fight. He was under indictment in Iran, and we hired him, Chalabi. Remember Chalabi?
Yeah, I remember that guy.
Yeah, remember that guy? He was the savior, and they found out the guy was under indictment for larceny and theft in Iran, and we welcomed him in. Then he double-crossed us by discovering that he had printed $600 million of counterfeit American money. These are the idiots that our State Department has depended upon to fight the terrorism over there. So it's been a whole series of blatant errors, but when you have windbags like Limbaugh and Hannity and these other clowns that are paid probably by the military complex in this country, Boobus America just doesn't understand, and there's no help.
Well, that's the part of it. I mean, I've got two strikes on Obama. That's one of the big ones that I just don't understand. his commitment and his drive to get more troops in Afghanistan. I just think, I remember my grandfather once told me, you don't take a stick and poke a beehive. You leave it alone and you go somewhere else.
And there meant,
beehive.
it's a good cliche, and as Will Rogers said many years ago, any country that goes 10,000 miles out of a way that gets into trouble deserves it.
Yeah, that's great.
So
I heard so much from you. It was wonderful to talk to you. Thank you very much.
my pleasure, sir, and have a great holiday.
You too, Irv.
Thank you. Our telephone number is 215-253-8877. Our chat room now, Ron, has that Windows thing on it and not the availability of chat room. So while Mr. Limbaugh today was shouting and screaming about the Black Political Caucus, he never mentioned about the dictatorship in China, which I would say is more of a threat to America than Fidel Castro, or never explained to his ditto heads where Fidel Castro came from. Where did this guy come from? Who is he? He's been a bone of contention for years to America, and yet he is still there. Well, I have a trivia question. What television program did Fidel Castro appear on in America as a guest? A national television program that Fidel Castro appeared on in America as a guest. And unless you know the history, ladies and gentlemen, as Santana once said, if you don't know history, you're going to make the same mistake over and over again. Well, two things I have an advantage over the Limbaughs and the others. I've lived that area because of my age. I lived in that time. I don't read from news clips, and I don't read from sound bites, and I don't hear from them. I lived that era of time. And I remember what made Fidel Castro. I was in Havana, Cuba in 1940 on a ship that sailed out of Florida called the Queen of Havana. And I saw what was going on in Cuba prior to the advent of Mr. Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and his brother Raul. And I doubt very much whether Limbaugh did, because Limbaugh wasn't alive at that time. My young producer who works for me during the day at WBCB was totally floored when he said, "I never learned that in history." I said, "Well, you're a computer whiz. Why don't you get on your computer and find out for yourself?" Isn't it amazing that we just accept things? You must be inquisitive, ladies and gentlemen, and that is, look for the answers. Who is Fidel Castro? Where did he come from? Where did Ho Chi Minh come from? Where did Mao come from? Where did Stalin come from? Where did Hitler come from? Where did these people rise to international fame? We sometimes know where our presidents come from and where our senators come from, where our judges come from, but where did these people come from? We listened to Limbaugh, we listened to these people. No, it wasn't 60 Minutes. We're getting the response to my trivia question is, yes, indeed, whoever put Ed Sullivan up is right. Ed Sullivan was a Sunday night program in America, ladies and gentlemen. Ed was a man who had absolutely no talent whatsoever, but he was a great television host. He was the one that introduced the Beatles, incidentally, to the United States. Appearing first on the Ed Sullivan program, was the first person to have Elvis Presley on his television program, introducing him. Well, Fidel Castro, after the prior to the defeat of Batista, who was the dictator of Cuba, came to America pleading with the United Nations that the Batista government was destroying the Cuban people, and he wanted relief, or he was going to lead a revolution, which he did. Anyway, I'm not going to teach you the history of where Fidel Castro came from. Learn yourself. I'm more interested in criticizing the idiot Limbaugh and his idiot listeners, which frighten me, because the same mentality that prevails in these syndicated talk shows is the same type of mentality that prevailed in Nazi Germany, in communist Russia, and in China. I'm not saying that Limbaugh is a Nazi, and I'm not saying he's a communist. I'm saying that the same type of mental vacuum of his listeners is exactly the same mentality of the people who followed Hitler and other tyrants around the world. And what we need in America is more people who think for themselves, who do the research, get the education, dig into the facts. So the Black Caucus political caucus goes to Cuba. Did you ever hear Limbaugh and these people attack Red China? They, in fact, call it mainland China. Did you ever hear Limbaugh and him attack China because they've occupied Tibet? Have you ever had the Dalai Lama on Limbaugh's program? A man who has been fighting for freedom for the free country called Tibet? You ever heard them take up the cause of the underdog of the Dalai Lama? Of course not. Have you ever heard him say that Taiwan is not a free and independent country, although we support them? And at the time of the Olympics, when the Taiwanese wanted to participate in the Olympics in China, China would not allow them in there as independent Taiwan folks. They had to go as Chinese. But you never hear the Limbaughs. And why don't they? Because 70% of the products that are sold on commercial radio and television today is made in China. Now, you can't get Limbaugh to criticize the sponsors whose products he sells. Mattresses, the whiz-bang windows, and stuff. Everything, as I said, about 60% of the products that are sold on the syndicated broadcast in America today are manufactured in China. So they will attack Fidel Castro. They will attack Cuba. They will not give you the history of Cuba because they will be shooting the golden goose that lays their eggs. And you must be smart enough to realize that. Maybe by listening to this program you will get smart enough, but you're certainly not going to get smart enough listening to the others. Our chat room is open for your questions. The phone number is 215-253-8877. This is Irv Homer with his comments for Wednesday, April the 8th, the evening of Passover, the beginning of the Jewish holiday. I am appalled, ladies and gentlemen, and I don't understand it. Maybe someone can explain it to me who is far more knowledgeable in maritime law. But last year, there were over 150 pirate attacks on commercial vessels that sail out of the Gulf of Aden on the coast of Somalia. Well, surprise, surprise, an American ship flagged with the American flag today was boarded by pirates. The ship is Danish registry flying the American flag. And as we speak right now, the captain of the ship is still being held hostage on one of the speedboats that the pirates attacked this gazillion-ton freighter that is on its way to Somalia with aid for the folks in Mogadishu. I cannot understand. Not one of the 20 crewmen on that ship was armed. How does America put a flag on a ship, go into an area that has been under a pirate attack for over a year now, not give them hand grenades, not give them RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades, not train the crew on firearms, and has no firearms, knowing full well that the whole damn area there is loaded with pirates? Are we insane? So now on the news tonight, the school who teaches merchant marine are now training the new cadets on the use of firearms. Do you remember the great hero called Ronald Reagan? Do you remember when we lost 238 Marines in a barracks because Ronald Reagan said they're not allowed to have ammunition in their guns? All of you people who are the Hannity followers, what would Reagan do? Laura Ingraham, what would Reagan do? Ann Coulter, what would Reagan do? Well, Reagan put 237 Marines in an embassy in a hostile country and forbid them to put ammunition in their weapons. So soon, Boobas America forgets. It's all documented. You don't have to take my word for it. But when we build up these people to such a crescendo on syndicated radio and blowhards, as my father once said, he said, it's easier for a lie will go around the world 100 times before the truth gets out of the parking lot. Well, look it up and see how many Marines died because Ronald Reagan's policy was no ammunition in the Marine weapons in the embassy in the Middle East. Kind of mind-boggling. The illusion of why these people are crazy. They build up these people like Ronald Reagan, like George Bush. They'll build up Barack Obama. They'll build up Bill Clinton to a point where it goes beyond being objective, but they become idols. And if you say, as I've done over the years, that these people are my employees. George Bush worked for me. I don't know about you. Barack Obama works for me. Bill Clinton worked for me. George Bush's father worked for me. I just sent my tax bill for 2008, ladies and gentlemen, today. It went in the mail. I guarantee you. They work for me. And by April Fool's Day, April the 15th, you'll also pay for them. And yet we idolize these people. You cannot criticize them. The blood of 257 dead Marines is in the carcass of Ronald Reagan. You may not like it, and I don't care. But talk to the people who lost their sons. Today, America has finally cleansed its conscience in doing something that should have been done long ago. For those of you who are as old as I am, and those of you who may be younger and know American history, during the World War II there was a thing known as the Bataan Death March, in which the Japanese army marched thousands of Americans and Philippines 70 miles on the island of Bataan, and they were dying along the way. Franklin Roosevelt promised after World War II that the Philippine soldiers who served in the Philippines would receive the same military benefits that American veterans would receive. When Roosevelt died, and the great Harry Truman, who people said was the greatest Democrat president, he dropped a bomb on Japan. When Mr. Truman became the President of the United States, he rescinded the order to grant the Philippine soldiers the same veterans benefits and recognition that the Americans on Bataan received. So in applause to Barack Obama and his administration, he rescinded Harry Truman's order, and today each one of the surviving Philippine soldiers signed up in the United States Army on Bataan were given full recognition and military honors, plus a $15,000 bonus. Another bubble blown by America's stupidity in its foreign policy. So we got Reagan with 257 dead Marines because they weren't allowed to put ammunition in their guns. You got Harry Truman, who double-crossed the Philippines. And we've got ex-President George Bush, who signed an agreement with the United Arab Emirates the last 2 days of his administration before Barack Obama came in, and gave military secrets and nuclear information to the United Arab Emirates, which is 60 miles from Iran, and it has been found out that the United Arab Emirates, our so-called allies, of course the allies of the Bush oil cartel in the Middle East, has been selling military secrets and nuclear capabilities to Iran. Thank you, President Bush. Now, you're not going to hear the ditto heads, and you're not going to hear Monica Crowley, and you're not going to hear Ann Coulter put that any in their books. And so the frustration level, when I said earlier, am I jealous of Limbaugh? You're damn right I am. Not because of the money he makes, because I'll never spend the money that I have before I die. Not that I'm saying that I'm a wealthy man, but I know how long I intend to live, and it ain't going to be that much longer. So I'm financially secure. None of this crap that's going on doesn't affect me. I saw it coming 10 years ago, warned my listeners 10, 15 years ago, caught hell from management because of things I said on the air. I was found to be right. I know colleagues of mine who are working in the industry who are working in Walmart today. But Irv Homer didn't know anything. See, Irv was just a dummy because I didn't know anything. I'm living more comfortably than they are. Take my word for it. Barack Obama goes to Turkey, President Barack Obama with it, and boy, the right-wing bloviators went crazy. Meeting with a Muslim country, saying that we will never declare war on the Muslims. And he has gone across the dial. You turn the radio dial and you go across there. And man, who are they rapprochement with Iran and the Muslims? And he goes into Turkey, and he's making us equal parity with blah, 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 blah. Well, geez, I remember reading an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Let me see. A year ago. I didn't hear Limbaugh talking about this. Didn't hear Limbaugh talking about it. Francis D'Amelia, Associated Press, wrote an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Christians and Muslims must overcome their misunderstandings. Well, gee, that's what Barack Obama said. In Turkey, and Limbaugh and Hannity, Gallagher, went crazy. The last 2 days, they've been going nuts. Christians and Muslims must overcome their misunderstandings. Oh, Pope Benedict told Muslim clergy and scholars yesterday as he pressed for greater freedom of worship for non-Muslims in the Islamic world. His meeting in an apostolic palace with a delegation of scholars and Muslim representatives capped a 3-day conference in Rome involving Catholic and Islamic experts. Benedict told participants he had followed the progress of the talks closely. The Pope's baptism of a prominent Egyptian-born Muslim last Easter upset some Muslims. He also angered Muslims in 2006 with comments quoting this 14th century emperor who criticized Islam. He since has expressed regret for that speech. Oh, the Pope apologized to the Muslims? Rush, did you hear that? Did you hear that, Hannity? He apologized to the Muslims. Dear friends, said the Pope, let us unite our efforts, animated by goodwill, in order to overcome all misunderstanding and disagreements. Let us resolve to overcome past prejudices and to correct the often distorted images of the other. plagiarism is, ladies and gentlemen? It's when somebody steals speeches, writings, statements of other people. Well, I accuse Barack Obama of plagiarism because he mouthed the same words that Pope Benedict did. But you will not hear the bloviators, you will not hear Rush Limbaugh criticize the Pope. You won't hear Mike Gallagher, Catholic, criticize the Pope. You won't hear Sean Hannity criticize the Pope. But they'll criticize Barack Obama, who stole the speech from the Pope. And while Mr. Limbaugh is concerned about the black political caucus meeting with a little pipsqueak like Fidel Castro, he doesn't criticize Saudi Arabia because non-Muslims cannot worship in public and Muslims who convert to Christianity face death. But you never hear Mr. Limbaugh criticize Saudi Arabia because Mr. Limbaugh's SUV uses Saudi gas to get his OxyContin ass around Florida and New York. The blatant ignorance that I see demonstrated in this country today is so frightening to me that it is the destruction of the First Amendment that I'm concerned about. Let's go to the chat room. Irv, why don't the ships carry some 50 calibers? You could probably get volunteers to man them. Richard Yardville. I don't know the reason, but now they're considering it. Now, let's assume, Rich, that they had armed the 20 crew members of the ship under the American flag that is being held by the pirates right now. We would save the United States Navy millions of dollars for rushing some 200 miles to where that ship is. So we will spend about $150 million in gas and fuel sending our fleet there when it would take a well-armed couple of guys on that freighter to shoot these bastards. You're right. Why are they not armed? I would think they would have a gun cabinet with a captain holding the key. I would agree with you. So now the United States Maritime Commission, as I said on the 6 O'Clock News, is examining whether or not we should train our maritime fleet. Well, our maritime fleet, ladies and gentlemen, in America is 24th in the world. We're not number one because these great patriotic American corporations flag their ships in other countries so they don't have to pay American taxes. You know, you've heard Hannity saying, oh, the poor, the rich pay 2/3 of the tax, blah, 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 blah. Well, Mr. Hannity, why don't you ask the American shipping industry why it flags its ship in Panama? Unbelievable. Irv, I have a problem with Obama's continuing Bush faith-based initiatives. Where is our Constitution, the separation of church and state? Will Muslims and Wiccans be included in faith-based? This is cases that are being held right now, my dear friend, in courts throughout our country. The fastest Wiccans happens to be witches, both good witches and bad witches. You cannot discriminate by granting one group of religion a 501c3 tax exemption without granting another organization. And so the government, by giving any type of recognition to any religion and granting them a tax exemption, and determining what is a religion and what is a cult violates its own constitution. I'm not anti-religious. As long as you don't do it in the street and scare the horses, it's all right with me. But you cannot discriminate. If someone has a religion where they eat the entrails of a frog and say that's going to get them to heaven, the United States government says, oh no, that's not a religion, so you can't get a tax exemption. Well, that is a violation of separation of church and state, because the government at that time is recognizing this as a religion and this is not. There are all kind of crazy religions or cults in America. Make no mistake about it. You got some real strange, but that's some of them want to let them do it. Government shouldn't be able to discriminate, but they do. And so when you talk about faith-based initiatives, Muslims are recognized as a religion by the United States government. Witchcraft, not yet. But Muslims right now are in court demanding in Dearborn, Michigan, and in Detroit, and will happen in your own neighborhood eventually, because the Muslim religion, Islam, is the fastest growing religion in the world. You don't believe it? Get into the areas where there is a high Muslim population, you will see the mosque being built. I think there's one being built in Ben Salem right now. They will demand the same recognition as the Catholic Church or any synagogue or any Protestant church or Baptist or anything else. What this case is in Dearborn, Michigan, is that if the Christian bells can ring on Sunday morning, a call for prayer, and wake up the neighborhood of people who don't want to go to church on Sunday morning and hear those bells clanging, the Muslims have 5 prayer calls a day. They want, in Dearborn, Michigan, because of the heavy population of Muslims, on loudspeakers in Dearborn, they want 5 prayer calls a day going out over the city of Dearborn, Michigan, stating that if the Christians can ring their bells, then you cannot discriminate against Muslims for wanting prayer call. And many of the Christian churches who ring their bells violate the sound ordinance in some communities. In other words, they're louder than what is permissible. You ride your car in some communities and you have your boombox zooming away. That's a violation of sound ordinances. In fact, SEPTA right now, I think, has a sound ordinance on riding on the bus or on the subway. Can't have those loud noises anymore. Or cell phones. So the presumption that because you are a majority, you have a special right in America, no longer exists, being challenged by Islamic countries and Islamic population here in the United States. Question on our chat room, and it is available for your questions or comments. You can also call at 215-253-8877. Irv, the churches getting tax exemptions start in 1913 with the passing of the IRS code. Now, what had happened was it was a gradual infringement on federal legislation by individual states passing separate legislation for religious recognition, because where religious institutions set up their churches, set up their schools, set up their hospitals, taking the burden of responsibility away from the government in a quid pro quo, meaning that you give me something, I'll give you something in return. So in the various states when religions opened up their own hospitals and schools, taking the burden away from the state to compensate the religion in those individual states said, look, we'll give you a tax exemption. So you will give us the hospitals, you will have the nuns as nurses, you'll have various and sundry boys organizations, you'll have various activities, you'll feed the hungry, you'll feed the poor, you'll clothe them. And so the government, in reciprocating, taking that tax burden away from the individual state government, said, look, we will give you a tax exemption. It spread across the country, and over a period of about 10 years, the federal government then decided that he will then give the concept, but there's a lot of misinformation and other things when it became a federal law. So that is how and we have another listener there who will say when the churches were put under the federal code. Irv, I heard today as I was working that Microsoft is getting millions of dollars to bridge their 2 campuses from government stimulus. I'm incensed over this stimulus bill. The more I hear, the more I feel we've been duped. What do you think? Sal from Langhorne. Well, there's no question we've been duped, because when the stimulus bill was passed and the TAR bills were passed, they were passed without any transparency. We didn't know where the money was going or who it was going to. The argument on the other side is, Sal, this is an area that we've never been in before. And as I said, this stimulus package is either going to make a hero out of this administration or the worst depression we're ever going to see. One of the problems that I see today is that the insurance companies that were regulated and by state mandate, the insurance companies are now not only AIG, who is handling mostly life insurance, but other Hartford, for one, the insurance companies who have a lot of money invested in annuities are now looking for a bailout. I don't know how far this bailout is going to go, Sal, but I'll tell you one thing. Yesterday I had mentioned on my radio program a trivia question, and the trivia question is, the banks now have a guaranteed FDIC of $250,000 of any individual deposit in the bank that you are insured. And so I contacted my people in Connecticut in a company called Veribank. I mentioned Veribank on my program 30 years ago when I first became aware of them. What Veribank does is you subscribe to Veribank either for an entire picture of the status of banks individually around the country, or you can subscribe to your individual bank and they give you a monthly reading as to the financial status of your bank. And it can run anywhere from $25 to $300 a year. And they have 3 things: red, green, and yellow. When your bank is green, then you've got the bank is pretty solvent. Yellow, it's a little shady. When your bank is in the red zone, then you've got a problem. And I contacted them, and they sent me an email that the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation in the United States today, even though they've raised the insured deposits from 100,000 to 2% is what they've got in reserve in the event of bank failure. So, Sal, I agree with you. They're printing money. They're throwing it around. They don't know what the ultimate result's going to be. And you're going to be more incensed as time goes on. Let us go to our next part. No, LBJ put churches in a 501c3 code in 1954 when he was a senator. You hear the influence of churches. You heard the influence of, before given the 501c3 code, churches were free churches, Dan. You're absolutely right, as I said, that when all of the states decided that it was advantageous, LBJ did put them in 1954 under the code of the federal IRS laws. Our next question. Irv, did you see where the Arab businessman in New York beheaded his wife? Is this a sign of things to come? I had, I guess about 15 years ago, to my dear contributor to the chat room, became aware of a Chinese gentleman who came home from work in New York, just by coincidence, caught his wife in bed with another man and killed them both. He had been in this country about 8 months, brought over by the Hui, which is H-E-I, the Oriental self-financed means to bring Orientals into this country, Indians in this country, sustain themselves. They don't come in looking for handouts. They are sponsored. And so I followed the case very interestingly. And at that time, Ron Kuby was working for Bill, what the heck was his name? His name escapes me right now. Bill Kunstler, who was one of the biggest civil rights lawyers at the time. If you recall him, he had long flowing hair. Ron Kuby, who now does a talk show in New York, was his, Bill was his mentor. And so I knew Bill Kunstler from the good old days of the civil rights movement. And I contacted Bill when he became the defense attorney for this Chinese man. And what he did was that in China, if you catch your wife, or if a wife catches a husband in a compromising position, it is considered perfectly legal to kill them both. See, our laws are a little different than the rest of the world's laws. And so he killed his wife and killed this man and saw nothing wrong with it. He stabbed one of them, I think, and cut the other one's fingers off or something. I don't know. Anyway, he killed them both. And he called the police and said, I killed them. What do you mean? Well, I killed them. I caught her in bed with another man through the interpreter that the New York Police Department thought. He said, well, what's the fuss? He couldn't understand why he was being arrested. The battle, I think, is still going on in the Supreme Court. I'm not sure. But there is a thing now called ethnic defense. And when a person comes to this country and is not familiar with all of our laws, but living in the country of origin, these are the laws that you live by. You cannot transpose the laws of those countries into the American system of justice. And so this Oriental gentleman, this Chinese gentleman, had no idea that the law of this land didn't mean you couldn't kill your wife if you caught her in bed with another man and kill him too. Now, there was a Senate Bill 1 many years ago that was introduced in America, and that Senate Bill 1 was a recodification of all the federal statutes. The book was about that thick. Now, the young man not working for me, but volunteered to do work for me, and I miss him dearly. He now lives in Florida. He's retired. But he was a head librarian for the Biddle Law Library. And so he did the research on this Senate Bill 1, which is a recodification of the federal laws, criminal laws. There were approximately about 60 unconstitutional laws that were put in there, open for debate. Anyway, to make a long story short, rather than go through the entire Senate Bill 1, they threw it out and said, well, instead of recodifying the federal legislation, what we will do is we'll just, as the cases come up, we'll then adjudicate that. So this one on ethnic defense is still in court. And if this Arab businessman can prove that his wife did something against the religion, against Islam, against the laws of Sharia, and he is living under the law of using ethnic defense, then he probably will get away with it. But he will be given a sentence, and then the sentence will be deposed. I don't know what the status of it is, but this could be the wave of the future as more and more Muslims come into America, where they want to institute the law of Sharia and not our laws. And so you will see more influence as more and more Muslims come into America to influence our courts in making these decisions as preference for their religion. We'll get into that one of these days. Irv, Jimmy Swaggart, Pat Robertson, and Jim Baker all had 501c3 tax exemptions and all lost them. Why should we fear Muslims when these cretins got away with screwing the taxpayers? Well, no politician wants to attack the religious whores such as Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Baker, or Pat Robertson, who take in millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. I dare one politician to ever attack Jimmy Swaggart or Robertson or Baker. I was going to do a program, I may do it tomorrow, so I will just leave you with this as we close the program tonight. I am neutral when it comes to religion. See, I have a deal with God. I don't bother him if I can do it myself. And most of my life, and I don't want anybody to follow what I say or do, I am not your leader. I have emphasized that for years on radio. I am not your leader. I will inform you as to what works for me. You do what you want to yourself. Don't let me. I never intended to be a broadcasting leader of anybody. So I am neutral when it comes to religion. I was born a Jew. I will die a Jew. But there are so many religions, I don't know which one I should take to go to heaven, if there's a heaven. So I just hang here in neutral. I don't bother God. He don't bother me. I don't blame him for anything. And I don't thank him for anything. Because, remember the commercial? Ma, I'd rather do it myself. I'd rather do it myself. My failures are my own. My victories and my success is my own. I don't blame God for things if I've failed him all my life, and I don't praise him for my successes. That's my opinion. But I just want to leave you with this today, ladies and gentlemen. Doing some research from the Pew Institute on their polling, that we are the most religious country in the civilized world. And you'll hear the debate. I resent this Judeo-Christian concept that we have in America. Yes, there were Jews in America. Chaim Solomon was one of the ones who financed the War of Independence. He was a Jew. There was much Jewish influence. But basically, this was Christian. So because of political expediency, we now are a Judeo-Christian country. Of course, without Judaism, you can never have Christianity. That's another subject for another day. But basically, we're the most religious country in the civilized world. So my question is this. How come we have the highest prison population per capita in industrialized countries? And we will be celebrating Passover starting tonight and tomorrow for the next 7 days, and we'll be celebrating Easter. So we are highly, and we'll have special services and Easter worship and Sunday morning in every prison that I know of. Where I know where God lives. God lives in prison because you don't believe it, go there sometime. And 90% of the guys that are in prison have found God, so he must be there. However, we have the highest prison population per capita in the industrialized countries. We also have the highest divorce rate per capita in marriages. We have the highest number of people living without the sanctimony of marriage in this country. Yet we're a religious country. Per capita, we have the highest gun violence in this country. Per capita, we have the highest child abuse and sexual molestation, including those in the church. Rabbis who kill their wives because they're horny. We have the highest incidence in rape. So my question is, with all this religiosity, statistics popped up. Like I say, you follow your own heart. I am not your leader. I don't want you to do anything that I say to do. I just say what is successful for me. Maybe it's successful for you. I don't know. But my name is Irv Homer. To all those of you of the Jewish faith, have a very happy and a healthy Passover. Friday will be Good Friday, I believe. Friday is Good Friday. And it was one of the days that I used to close my bar from 12 to 3 and had prayer services behind the bear taps. No, I didn't. But I did have some good folks in the bar getting sloshed from 12 to 3 in celebration. I'm Irv Homer. Thank you for listening. We'll see you Friday night.